In the late 1800s, civilization finally encroached into what for generations had been considered an endless frontier. Since the discovery of the New World, the only inhabitants to be found in the Great Plains region were its indigenous peoples, a handful of explorers, and a few brave settlers heading west as quickly as possible. For years during the Civil War, wild Texas Longhorn cattle had been able to reproduce unchecked and were now numbering into the millions. Early Texas ranchers had seized upon the opportunity this brought and began rounding up as many free cattle as possible in order to drive them to California or back east. A longhorn worth only $1 or $2 in the South was worth $30 to $40 back east and as high as $300 a head in California. With all but the Comanche Kiowa now rounded up into reservations, and most white settlers remaining further east or opting to pass over the region, early ranchers such as Samuel Burke Burnett, Daniel Wagner, Charles Goodnight, and Oliver Loving had the whole of central and north Texas essentially to themselves and their cowboys. Inevitably, however, these ranchers found themselves at odds with newly arriving farmers, smaller ranch operations, and various groups of cattle thieves, as well as the occasional rogue Indian raiding party. The last holdouts of the Comanche Kiowa were also doing their best to hold on to a diminishing territory outside the reservations known as Comancheria, which included the Texas Panhandle all the way down to modern Midland, Odessa, eastern New Mexico, southeast Colorado, southwest Kansas, and what would become Oklahoma. By the 1870s, the U.S. Army had strong-armed the last of the free Comanche Kiowa into inhabiting lands on the reservations. This, combined with the influx of white settlers who brought with them an invention known as barbed wire, would put an end to free grazing. While the introduction of barbed wire did greatly hinder grazing operations, the situation never grew quite as violent in Texas as it did in other places like Wyoming, where the bloodshed was so intense it became dubbed the Range Wars. In Texas, the problem was a combination of barbed wire fences, competing ranchers, sheep ranchers, and farmers. In 1884, a law had to be passed making fence cutting a felony. This all set the stage for a very unlikely alliance to form between perhaps the most stubborn and strong-willed groups of people on the earth at the time, Texas cattlemen and Comanche Kiowa. Finding themselves boxed in without enough land and surrounded by competition, the two groups found a way to succeed in the New World by working together. From a desire to better know the heritage of his white mother, Comanche chief Quanah Parker sought to form relationships with the white inhabitants of Texas. At the same time, 4-6's ranch founder Samuel Burke Burnett had a need for land to grow his cattle operation that couldn't be found in Texas and saw in Quanah Parker the perfect opportunity. Burnett, along with his close friend Daniel Wagner, owner of the 3D's Ranch, worked with Quanah and the Comanche Kiowa to forge an agreement to lease Comanche reservation land nicknamed the Big Pasture in what would become Oklahoma. There are records indicating the cattlemen leased approximately 600,000 acres for a combined payment of nearly $70,000 annually for exclusive grazing rights on the Comanche Kiowa land. Adjusted for inflation, that would be slightly over $2 million in today's money. The bond grew to go much further than just land leases, however. The cattlemen funded trips to Washington, D.C. for Quanah and other Comanche chiefs in order to aid their pursuit of better treatment by the U.S. government. With each other's influence, even President Teddy Roosevelt took notice and made a trip to Texas, where Burnett and Quanah hosted a wolf hunt for him, in which several wolves and coyotes were successfully killed. It was in both parties' interest for the reservation to be strongly held by the Indians, as more and more settlers moved west and pressure began to be put on Washington to declare Indian territories open to settlement. The Texas ranchers and Comanche Kiowa fought a good fight together for decades before at last the modern world swallowed them both. Together, strong men named Burnett, Quanah, Wagner, Roberts, Goodnight, and others kept the adventure and the spirit of the West alive just a little while longer.